Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the February 11th, 2026 meeting of the Finance Committee. This is a hybrid meeting, so roll call votes will be required, and this meeting will be recorded to assist in the generation of minutes.
Bob, don't mute your phone, Bob.
I think we can mute him.
We'll do it this way.
Yeah. Alice.
Oh, sorry. Is it Robin Harding?
Yeah.
So continuing right along. We do need to take a roll call to establish quorum. Alyssa.
Here.
George.
Here.
Raphael.
Here.
Nate.
Here.
Robert.
Here.
And John.
Here.
We have a 7-0 full house. Thank you very much, everybody. Do we have anybody from the public who is here? I see none, so we'll dispense with that. So we're going to move, and we don't have any transfers, so we're just going to move right to our primary objective for tonight, which is the FY27 budget review of the Dennis Yarmouth Regional School District. And we are fortunate tonight to have with us the superintendent of the district, Dr. Mark Smith, and the finance director for the district, Dr. Susan Gilson, with us tonight. As part of this, we did send out we had met previously about the budget, so and everybody I asked to have a chance to review the introductory slides, and I think everybody has. And some people complimented Dr. Smith on his smooth delivery the other night. So I would turn it over to Dr. Smith, and again, I did identify 5 priority areas for tonight's discussion. The T3 of B2. Yeah. So we'll take we'll let
looking into that 50,000 and don't give any details.
Bob.
Okay, so you
Oh. X out.
And I can see the participant. Okay.
you're gonna share the screen?
I did, it's right there.
Okay. Yep. Okay.
All right, thank you. So I'll just kick us off, and then I'm going to hand a good chunk of the presentation over to Dr. Gilson, because she, based upon the sort of focus questions, which you were fortunate enough to get ahead of time, which was very helpful. She's done a sort of a deep dive into some of the areas to try to give some answers ahead of time, and then obviously we'll take whatever further questions that the committee has. So I'm going to let her speak to that, but I'll just sort of launch us with some of the front matter, I guess, for lack of a better phrase. So, I've used this slide with each of the presentations that, as the whole budget is built around 2 big ideas. The first, and actually not really in any particular order, but on the right-hand side are 3 main strategic objectives, which we launched a strategic plan last year. So we're in year 2 of a 5-year strategic plan, and we have 3 main strategic objectives that are driving our work. And so, any budget should be driven with a sense of purpose and a sense of directionality. And these are the 3 big things. Each one of these has then further initiatives under it. We've had different presentations on this, and I'm not going to bore everybody with all the details, but we have the 3 big initiatives, which have those 3 big buckets. The first one is around eliminating disparities in achievement, access for every student, which is really a curriculum and instruction focus. The second one is around consistent district-wide systems to support organizational effectiveness. That has both arms that stretch into the way we operate as a business, right? So like things from like payroll and leave systems, which quite frankly are getting better, but are very antiquated. You know, the example I always use is if somebody wants to take, you know, a leave in our district, they fill out a piece of paper, and that piece of paper for 630 people gets passed through the district and then ultimately lands on one person's desk, our payroll person. And then that person goes through all those stacks and then manually enters it into the system, right? And that's then hourly employees are done the same way. Hourly employees manually fill out time cards on pieces of paper that have been Xeroxed so many times over the course of the years that they're practically upside down at this point. And then again, those pass through the system physically and they get manually entered into a system. So you can imagine sort of the opportunity for error, the inefficiency, et cetera, et cetera. So that's part around trying to clean up that. But then also on the education side around, you know, how do we make determinations for moving students in and out of our programs, for the consistency for our special education programs, for our multilingual programs, et cetera. So it's got sort of two wings in that second one. And then the third one is around our management of our property and developing a long-term capital improvement plan for our facilities. And then on the left-hand side is last year we had a committee that worked together that took input from around the entire district to develop a set of core values to help drive the district. And I always say, you know, core values are most important when you have to make difficult decisions. So like in this particular year, as we're looking at some potential reductions, you know, how do we make those decisions and what helps us drive those decisions? So that committee, again, based upon feedback from across the entire school community, came up with 5 core values that drive our district. And those are in no particular order: integrity, equity, dignity, excellence, and community. And that, you know, you can go on our website and each one of those, they did a great job of defining what do those mean in DY. And so anyway, so those are just sort of the things that are driving our work each and every day. So then moving on, where we are in a process, we just had a meeting on the next slide there. I don't know who's driving. I guess Ms. Mullen, right? Where the school committee just had on Monday had their public hearing. So, you know, I know we've talked about this with lots of different people. The school's process falls a little bit behind the town's process just because of when we get our state revenue information. So the school committee just had their public hearing last night. And then they will take their final vote based upon, this is all like laid out in the regional agreement, but they'll take their final vote for the final budget on March 9th. Technically, they have until Friday, March 13th as the very last date that they can take their vote, all based upon the regional agreement, because it's all has to be 45 days before the first town meeting, which is April 28th. And I have to edit that slide. It's not yet voted because that was based upon me not understanding the bylaws in the town of Yarmouth. So I keep forgetting to edit that slide. So ignore that where it says not yet voted, because it doesn't need to be voted because it's in your bylaws. All right, moving on to the next slide. So there have been a set of things that have been driving the budget this year. A couple of them predictable and a couple of them unpredictable. The predictable factors have been implementation of that strategic plan. Like I said, where we have a long-term plan, we have certain settled contracts, things like our regular day bus. We had a multi-year contract with that vendor. So we knew what the increases were going to be, our custodial contracts, some of our tech services, et cetera. We've level funded all the major supply lines for the second year in a row in the schools. And then we have some of our collective bargaining agreements are settled. So that means we know what the increases are going to be. On the other side, there's been some unpredictable factors, which make it harder to predict. Health insurance, although we did just get that number yesterday. But we were holding a bigger number because we were hearing some pretty scary things around health insurance. Out-of-district tuition continues to be a largely escalating cost. And then non-regular day transportation. So the cost that it takes to move, get students back and forth to out-of-district placements, as well as McKinney-Vento, which is transportation for students who are unhoused. And then we do have 2 unsettled collective
Can,
You said.
can- can you please, everybody, can you please just mute yourselves? Because I'll mute you, but then you unmute you. So Bob, I need you to mute. Okay, can you hear me?
Say it again, please. What was that?
I need you to mute, put yourself on mute, turn off your microphone. Thank you.
Yeah, it's okay. And then we have, like I said, we have a couple of unsettled bargaining contracts. One of them is a small group. The DYSAA is assistant principals is largely who makes up that group. So it's like 12. So I think there's 14 people total in that group. But then the other group, the DYEA, that's our teachers group. That's a big group. It's 300 and a little over 350 people in that group. So that one obviously has a large impact on, because a huge part of our budget is salary. So that's a big, and then one that hit us sideways this year was low state aid. I've been forecasting sort of that at some point in time, the Student Opportunity Act funding would slow down the increases to DY. I thought we had one more year, but we really saw a reduction in state aid this year based when the governor's numbers came out. And that,
Next slide.
yeah, you can skip this one. This one just says,
Yeah, it's the same thing.
it says
Yeah,
same thing, yeah.
Is
just-
that
Alright.
the slide you want?
yep.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to hand it off to Dr. Gilson to talk about the budget.
Okay, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education requires us to report out with various DESI function codes. These are the DESI function codes: administration, instruction, pupil services, transportation, maintenance and utilities, benefits and fixed charges, private school transportation, fixed assets, and tuition to other schools. So we have looked at our actuals for the previous couple years, and then our FY27 request column is there. Our total operating budget was tentatively approved for $86,308,845. We have been actively working since the 2nd of February with our leaders, our district leaders, our school leaders, and our subcommittee for finance of our school committee to make recommendations on how to reduce that number. So next slide. These are some of the finance subcommittee recommendations. These were presented at the public budget hearing on this past Monday. So right now, we had talked with them about reducing by one central office administrator, and that's the assistant director for pupil services. This is shifted, that the impact of that will be to shift work to team chairs through observations and evaluations will also be shifted to the building leaders. So that will be certainly a loss for us, but we're not going to be able to add the additional grade 4 teachers. So it will shift our class sizes up to about 21 or 22 students. We had originally 3 priority 4 items packed into our facilities budget. So we were going to replace burners and things that needed addressing. So we moved those out of our budget. They total $467,000, and we're going to tap our excess and deficiency fund for that. We also we're recommending a reduction of 10 para-educators based on a reorganization of staffing within the buildings to support students. We had some retirements, so we are not going to replace a history teacher at the high school. And what that will mean is fewer sections of electives and larger class sizes in the department. At the intermediate school, we had another retirement in the form of a physical education teacher. We're not going to replace that person, and we're going to need to align the intermediate and the middle school schedule, which are both in the same building. We're going to reduce a grade 3 teacher at Ezra Baker. And again, that will impact the class size. So there'll be about 20 students per class. And then we also recommended a reduction of 1 assistant principal at the high school. and total savings. What we found was that, going from the 86 million number that I had mentioned initially, so we're now able to save about $1.4 million. Next slide. And this basically explains how the reduction impacts the total staff in the bargaining units. We'll go to the next slide. And then other items, we knew that the vote from healthcare was going to happen today. But we have been discussing it, and we felt like we had an idea of the direction it would be moving in, and we hoped we were right. We were right. So we had all made a move to decrease from 15% to 10% for the active teachers, and 15% again to 10% for the retired teachers. And then we were able to, from the teachers that are retiring that we know about right now, we were able to save $145,000. So again, we've had an additional $621,000 in savings. I will also add, we were fortunate today because the vote actually decreased the health insurance from down to 8%. So we are happy to hear that, because that will save us. And what we're going to have to go back, and since it just happened today, and I'll be able to calculate the exact amount of what that is. So from the tentative budget established on February 2nd, that came in at 86,308,845. We were able, with those reductions that I just described, able to get down to 84,287,393, which is 4.9% higher than the operating budget that was approved last year. We're going to continue to really work on that, and we're going to plan to continue our meetings to assess how we can preserve our structure to make continuous improvement that the kids in the schools deserve. The minimum required contributions are up, and we have talked about with the tri-board and certain groups and presented it on our school committee meetings. This is like the second slice out of the pie. I don't know if people have been listening to the pie as we talk about the.
We love the pie.
Yeah, it's delicious. But the state actually determines what that minimum required contribution is. It's an aggregate of resident income and property wealth, which can fluctuate. And sometimes Dennis is higher, and sometimes Yarmouth is higher. It's assessed each year by the state. Then the remainder of that amount to be assessed is taken from the rolling 5-year average enrollment of the students. And it's the foundation enrollment, which is the students that have the potential to go to DY. It's not the actual students that are sitting in the seats, because there are all sorts of ways that kids receive education: choice, charter, and we have students choicing into DY from other towns. We also have students going to choice out of DY. Again, right now, the minimum required contribution plus the 5-year rolling averages creates the potential, as of right now, without any other things factored in, but we're looking at additional. It's a 5% increase to Dennis, and it's a 6.87% increase to Yarmouth. So a couple of the agenda items that I was asked to talk about were related to benefits and fixed costs, transportation, paraprofessionals, and building utilities. So I am prepared to talk about those now. And if you can There we go. Okay, so, basically, as I do a budget, there are well over 1,200 lines in the budget. And so, I do use pivot tables, and I align everything in Excel, and that enables me to manipulate things. I was asked about what is, what in line, the account line 5,100, for example. That's the Barnstable County retirement fees. That's the FICA Medicare district share. And the column with numbers to the left is the FY 26 amounts, and the FY 27. We had an exact number come in from Barnstable County retirement.
Really?
Yes, it was a projection of like 2.1%. So that's,
But you haven't received the actual
we haven't.
Parrot, because Parrot, just to give an update, Parrot
Yes.
is reviewing Barnstable County retirements figures right now, but the actual letter has not gone.
That's correct. Yeah, so we received we inquired and said, well, what do you estimate it to be? And they estimated 2.1%. So that's what is in our budget right now. The FICA Medicare district share, again, with contracts and all of that contractual obligations, our salaries are going up, and the FICA is a percentage of those salaries. And so all of that is, essentially what comprises the makeup of 5,100 lines. And then also still, in the health insurance active line, there's still that 15% in that account. So if we could go to the next slide. So that will be after I go through and evaluate the impact of all the reductions and the changes and update information, that will be a part of the change. And then health insurance retirees, there's still 15% in that line.
Is that the same? 8% for the
yes.
retirees and the
For
active?
everybody, yes, correct. Okay, and so I go on to the next slide, but, okay. Now, the transportation has been a very interesting thing for me to review, because essentially, while the transportation line, in FY 26 at the top, it says about 5.2 million. And then, in FY 27, it jumps to about $6.1 million, okay? And so people see clearly where that is. If you go to the next slide, I highlighted it. And what has been interesting is the jump in McKinney-Vento transportation. McKinney-Vento is a mandated requirement. It's a federal mandate that we're required to honor. And the interesting thing was the actuals rose in FY 25. We did not even budget enough in the line for what I think FY 26 is going to be. So, the actuals in FY 25 actually guided with the implementation for the FY 27 number. So if you can flip the next slide, I'm going to explain a little bit about McKinney-Vento and our students that are homeless. This is a homeless assistance act that requires us to consider districts to provide specific educational services. It mandates it. And we're required to transport students experiencing homelessness. And the associated costs must be considered required expenditures under applicable federal law. So let's talk about the DY students that are,
Next slide.
Next slide, yeah. Yeah, that would be good. So I went in and I unpacked the data that we had of students that attending DY in all the different grade levels. And if you look at the grand total, you can see I put in what we had in 2022, 23, then how the numbers went up slightly in 23, 24, how they really exploded in 24-25, and that was at considerable cost. And then they are still they're creeping upward. So we have 260 students that are homeless. And I'm going to talk about where those students are on the next slide. So just to give a little perspective, we have taken in data on our students in terms of homeless enrollment locations and their condition. Some are sharing homes, some are in hotels and motels. I'm not entirely sure we have one student that is missing. And then some are in shelters. But the other thing that, typically the biggest concern is the kids that are unsheltered. And I highlighted that in the yellow. They're living out of their cars, in parks, in campgrounds, and in abandoned buildings, and substandard, inadequate housing. So those are, I am concerned about all of the homeless students, but that is the profile of our students attending the Dennis and Yarmouth schools. So if we can go to the next slide. Okay. The other thing that I was asked to talk about was the paraprofessionals. Because the line from FY26 to FY27, I'm looking a little bit like they are increased. And so one of the things that the way that they were calculated, I believe last year, was they were calculated as a projection, where one number was used straight through to calculate all of the assistant salaries. If we can go to the next slide, I did a different approach. I downloaded all the names of the people that we were paying in district. I sent them out to all of the principals at the schools because I wanted to have them verify that these were all people that were working in their schools. And, so I got that feedback back. And I took the salary grid, which is our contractual obligation to pay people this hourly rate. In our download, I had basically I took the FY27 contractual rate, I multiplied it by the hours per day and the work calendar days, and I came up with the amount using that formula that was in actually our database. Then I went through, and if we go to the next slide, then I went through with every single name. I made sure that there were no repeated names unless they had a split position in the district. And so again, I used a pivot table where I could bundle all the names associated with each account. And if you have worked with pivot tables, which I am sure everybody has, I can unpack them and see every single name that belongs to every single paraprofessional that is in the district. So I made an exact accounting of all the personnel that we have and came up with my amounts that way. Okay. So the other topic that I want to address too is electricity. Electricity and we pay our bills through Eversource, and basically I talked to my MASBO group, which is the Massachusetts Association of School Business Officials. We meet as a group on the Cape, and I asked my colleagues for a recommendation of how we should budget for this next year. Budgeting for electricity, you have your rates, you can look at past history. It's not an exact science because it depends on, like right now, for the past month, we've been through a particularly cold snap with a lot of snow. So right now, those are just projected amounts. They can go down, they can go up. you know, and, you know, so we'll go to the next slide and we'll talk about, I also did, the same with the natural gas heating. And I put it in as a percent change of 13%. So, one of the things, two of the things that we're looking at, if we can go to the next slide, one of the things that we have done is a bill analysis for the last, you know, the last year. And we were working with a company who, this is a bill analysis of just our high school. And we are considering generating some revenue from potential energy savings. And I'm going to tell you how we're going to do that. So our actual energy spent at the high school, that bill was 500, the annual energy spent was $530,539. Okay, so next slide. Basically, what their estimate on a conservative scale was that we could potentially save 191,000 of that amount. And the way that we would do that is by applying what I call a very unique smart thermostat. And basically that conservative savings, do you see the 80% and the 20%? What that would do is the 20%, if they are correct, and we do get some savings, and I believe after looking at the data that we might, so basically, the 20% would come immediately back to us, but the rest of the 80% would be invested for 3 years to pay off the technology that makes up this smart thermostat. And if we could go to the next slide. So the interesting part of this is part of their audit was to look at the actual 204 HVAC parts that are part of the high school HVAC system. HVAC is usually HVAC, anything. If it breaks, it's expensive. If you have to call people in to fix and diagnose HVAC, it's expensive. So the uniqueness of this system, they have a sole source procurement affidavit because because of the optimizer technologies that are designed to work with the parts. It connects with the online weather. It integrates with the school scheduling program, but it also integrates with the facilities scheduling program. So ultimately, you know, if we do have the potential to save anything, I would really be a big fan of applying this pilot. It won't cost us anything. And if we don't have any savings from the result of it, there will be no charge. So, but I am confident after looking at the data that it appears to be really promising. So while energy is variable, and you try to predict, the weather patterns change and the environments change, but this seems to have the potential, and we might like to get an audit done of our middle school as well. So we can go to the next slide. Let's see. The other thing that that I've been working with the departments on, you know, this is an interesting year because I am new and I here, and I have been exploring like over the 1,200 account lines that we have, and each one of those account lines, as you can appreciate, is jam-packed with things that people are purchasing, all goods and supplies. And so one of the things that we're looking at is how do we better align our purchases with the DESI chart of accounts. And for example, I know Mr. Simon brought to my attention as I shared with him the end of the year reports. And, I actually had asked already our technology director to unpack everything that was going into the administrative tech contracted services line. This is everything that is functionally running the district. The amount that was put in that line for the FY26 year was $35,000. And to run every single admin tech contracted services in the district, it costs far more. I did a year-to-date lookup, and we're at 351,000. And that's a substantial, that is, as I look at everything, because I asked our tech department to itemize every single thing that we were buying. This is on this list, you have our nursing system software, you have our security software, you have our evaluation software, you have our E-rate consultants, which brings down the cost for every other technology purchase. We have our library system software. We have our server management, server for backup and recovery. And so looking at this, is going to be helpful, because if you go to the next slide, the things that we noticed are the jump up in administration looks to be if you remember, back to the first couple slides that we presented, the increase in administration was 21%. And that is because the admin tech contracted services line is so underfunded. You can see on that, in that graph, the FY26 was 35,000, and that is nowhere near what the district needs. And then if we go to the next slide, so we're considering how we recalibrate. We know there's that line needs more, and substantially more. And so, on the DESI chart of the accounts, we are working on recalibrating. And so there is 1450, that's the line I was just talking about. But there are also lines 4400 and 4550 for technology, infrastructure, maintenance, and support. And so and the other 4450 is for technology, infrastructure, maintenance, and support. So we're going to do a thorough evaluation of everything that people are buying out of those lines, and we're going to try to make sure that they're being used in the right places. So that's just some of the examples of, we're being very thorough in terms of mapping. I do needs-based budgeting, which if there's a contractual obligation, as I did with the para salaries, they're not projections. They're based on the people that are being paid out of our accounts now. And I really work with the information in those pivot tables to tell me how much we really need to pay people. So that's essentially the end of the presentation.
Except for his.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
so-
right.
Yeah, and so the last thing is just sort of looking at maintaining our progress over time, right? So really, we're sitting right now at roughly just under a 5% budget increase. And, as we look at everything, that 5% budget, just under 5% budget increase has us starting to make some reductions in our program and not advancing things that we'd like to advance. And what I recognize is that I didn't put in my head, and I have to adjust it for the next time I do this presentation, but you want to sort of look at each of these columns as going out in fiscal years, right? So that first where it says increase professional development on the top and it says increase class sizes 8 to 12 and reduction in electives on the bottom, that's, next fiscal year. And then the next set of boxes would be the following fiscal year. And then, so this is sort of like, as, if we were to continue to have either stable or strong funding, we'd be able to continue year over year to add these things. These aren't all things that would happen in one year. And the same as if we continue to not be able to fund, these problems are just going to continue to compound over time. Right. So it's just sort of thinking about this not as a 1 year challenge, but as a multiple year challenge. And because I know this came up as a conversation when we met with like the chairs of each of the boards and the directors, the finance directors and the town administrators. Like, it's a structural challenge, right? As a school district, that what we need for stable funding and then what would be for strong funding is a pinch point. So anyways, it's trying to just show this as we look out over time. If we continue to have limited funding, this problem that we're facing now is just going to compound itself as we go out into the future. And we're sort of somewhere right in between, right? So right now, what we presented to the school committee is somewhere between that yellow and that white line. So we're not seeing all of these potential problems in the future because we're kind of skirting the line. As I mentioned to the school committee, I mentioned first to the finance subcommittee because the finance subcommittee was ultimately what determined the recommendations that made to the school committee meeting. But what we brought to the finance subcommittee as potential recommendations were recommendations that had high impact in the sense that we're going to have the largest impact on savings for the budget, but we're also low impact we're going to have the smallest impact on our school program. So high impact, low impact, sort of the slash in the middle. That's what we were looking for.
So with that being said, so I thought it would be useful just to pause for a minute to talk about the timing of the process, because that was sort of, John, that was your question earlier. So this is sort of our first look at this. So I'm going to open the floor for questions. Now, obviously, Dr. Gilson has done a lot of work already. So I would encourage everybody to, as you're asking questions, don't necessarily expect an answer today. And be, again, focused primarily on clarifications and so on. So that would be thing one. Thing two is the process is, in terms of our review process, typically we review a budget and then approve as long as there aren't unknowns. So in this particular case, there are enough unknowns. We probably will not vote to recommend next week because there's a whole bunch of things that are still being finalized. The other thing is our final recommendation is going to be informed by a couple of things that are coming up on February 25th. That's the next tri-party meeting. So that will be one milestone. The other key milestone is the school committee's vote. At this point, the budget that has been approved is a tentative budget. So by the 9th and the latest by March 9th and the latest March 13th is going to be the final vote. So that is really sort of going to be the baseline for our final recommendation to town meeting. As it stands right now, sort of with the reductions that they talked about, the way that the formula works, for every dollar below the 86,300,000 roughly, for every dollar that it goes down, because of the 70-30 split, because all of the money at this point is going to be 70-30 split. So every dollar that goes down, 70 cents goes down for Yarmouth, 30 cents goes down for Dennis. At this point in time, if you do that math, we are, so our town budget included 2.5%. So obviously there's a big difference still between 2.5 and the adjusted now 6 point something. That is would be equivalent to a $2.1 million override for the DY district, plus the roughly 700,000 for the Cape Cod Tech for their increased enrollment. So a total of about 2.8 at this point in time. I like that one. Again, we did ask for some specific things. I see that Raphael has his hand up. Sir, you're first with your hand up. You get to ask the questions first.
Okay. Well, I didn't want to force your hand, Richard. Are you good with describing the process and what the next steps are before? Because my questions are going to be kind of in the weeds, but I'm not expecting a 100% answer right now. Are you good on your end?
I think so. I mean, the process is the
Okay.
process.
Right. So what I'd like to do is go back to the transportation slides, if you don't mind. And again, I realize you're new at this and may just be getting your feet wet on some of this stuff. It's line budget item 3,300. It's for the plus. I want to make sure I'm looking at the numbers and don't embarrass myself here. Won't be the first time or the last. So I saw a slide somewhere that showed that our homeless child count has doubled in 3 years, from 130 to 260 from 2023. Did I read that right, or did I imagine seeing that?
No, let's go right into it. It's couple slides down. Okay. Yeah, there's the data.
So from 23 to 26, we now have another 130 homeless children in Dennis Yarmouth.
Yes.
Is the McKinney-Vento, and if I'm screwing that name up properly, please correct me, but is that 898,779, is that based on that head count calculation, or is it based on actual truck rolls and the type of vehicle, fuel, mileage, maintenance? Because my impression in your characterization is that these 1s, 2s, and 3s students are scattered all over the DY area.
So it's a little bit of, if I'm understanding your question correctly, so it's not a 1-to-1 for every 260 kids, because if you're homeless and you live within our borders, you can take for most of the students, you can take our regular transportation. So you might be doubled up with another family, but you are still coming to DY. You can ride our regular day transportation. So from a transportation standpoint, there's no additional cost. Where it becomes additional cost is in one of two scenarios. So one is you were originally reside in Dennis, you lose your housing, you now reside in Yarmouth, you have right under McKinney-Vento to continue to attend the Ezra Baker School. Mm-hmm. So now we have to transport you from Yarmouth to Dennis. Our regular day transportation doesn't allow for that, right? Our elementary school runs Dennis, and our elementary school runs due Yarmouth. We don't have elementary school runs that run across town. So now we have to set up transportation to get a kid from Yarmouth to Dennis. And we don't have capacity to do that internally, so we have to hire private transportation to do that, which gets very expensive. Or you are and it works either way. Either you resided, let's say you lived in Barnstable or Mashpee, you lost your housing, you now live, have some scenario where you have temporary housing in Yarmouth, or the other way around. You lived in Dennis or Yarmouth, and now you have temporary housing in another town. You have the right under McKinney-Vento to continue to go to your home school. So then the two districts have to work out transportation so it's a shared cost between the two towns. But again, It's worked out with private transportation, and that's like on a good day, with a good transportation vendor that we've negotiated the cost down, it's like $100 a day to get the kid back and forth. So that's where
So based on, again, I try to keep things simple. Based on 898, 779 and 260 students, that's $3,400 per student per school year.
Right?
yeah, but not every kid's riding, but yeah, I mean,
Well, that makes it that makes it worse then. That makes the calculation even worse in my view.
Because again, some kids for a lot. So imagine again, I sign off on the bills. So it's $100 a day per kid. So $100 a day per kid. That's some kids it's 180. Potentially it could be $100 a day. It could be $180,000 in transportation costs.
So these aren't church buses; these are individual cabs or car services for these kids.
Yeah, usually minivans, but yeah,
It's 18 now.
Do we know what
18,000. Sorry, I did the math wrong, but yeah,
the
18,000.
spend is looking like for this year? Because that was the slide was budget, right?
It's proposed, budget to
with-
propose.
Go.
Yeah, so if you go back,
Right, yeah.
so the 190 is budget for this year.
Right.
Yeah, right, and
Do
that.
you have an
was-
idea of what the spend will actually be this year?
Oh, it's way up there
That's-
already. And so that's where like,
What
know,
page are you looking?
You went to you
went too far.
And John, that's exactly my concern. Is this this is based on actuals? That's exactly my concern here.
Sorry, didn't mean to steal your thunder.
Yeah.
No. Hey,
Right
appreciate
there.
it.
Before the actual was known, the 190 was imported into the budget for this, or it was approved for this year. Without considering the actual that was happening. And if you look at the data, if you could go to go to maybe 2 slides down. Yeah. The data, basically without knowing that we were moving from 130 to 248. Because the data on McKinney-Vento hadn't checked in. The new budget was in place being proposed. And so there was no way to, and I wasn't here doing the budget.
Yeah, but I think his question is about, I
Yes.
remember when we put that number in, we
Yeah.
looked at the actuals at the end of FY25 to forecast this.
Yes, we did.
Yes,
To forecast the number for now, for the projection for 27.
yes.
Yeah, because we recognized that there was no way that 190 could handle it.
That's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Jennifer Mullen.
Yeah, I just have a question because it might be a theme throughout the whole.
Yeah.
So I guess one of the questions is, this year with transportation, like you said, you're gonna be spending more than the line item. So usually you can kind of project that out. So I guess one of the questions was, what was the projection of the actual spend for 26? Do you have that?
the projection for the actual.
Yeah, so right now we're in the middle of
Yeah.
FY 26. We're in February.
Mhm.
So what was
Oh.
what did you spend for transportation from July to date?
I could look that. up,
Okay.
Right, I don't have.
And
that
then you
off
can
the top
kind of
my-
usually do a projection
Yeah,
to the end, so you can say,
what
this
you're
is
gonna
what
get.
we'll spend.
Yeah,
And so then
Listen.
it brings,
When we have encumbrances on the
Can you
line.
take notes
Yeah.
on action items for me?
Yeah.
It's just because I'll lose track.
and then it brings into a question of a bigger picture, because it was a theme, I
Yeah.
think, with the paraprofessionals as well as you. So when I hear the presentation, you're building the budget from the ground up on these line items. So what that tells me is that it's been insufficiently budgeted in the past. But you've been still spending more than what you've been budgeting. So the money has been coming from somewhere in order to cover that. And usually with the school department under chapter 71, you have one line item, right? But in your budget, you'll have several line items because how you break them down to DESI. And usually with the vote of the school committee, you move money around. And so I was wondering, does Dennis Yarmouth bring line items to the school committee to vote to move money around during the year? If you're falling short in a line item, and where has that money been coming from? to pick up the shortfalls in IT, transportation, and the paraprofessionals? Because that tells me that if you've been spending all this, but it's not in the line item budget.
So historically, no, there's not a history of doing function code transfers.
No.
We're working to change that practice. But what you'll see, there's been the fixed asset line has been funded at, 300, for the last couple of years, been funded at 365,000. And that's a spot where whenever the quarterly reports under the previous business administrator were presented, that line was never encumbered or expended all the way through to the end of the year. So that was the place upon which all that extra came out of. And you'll see it's funded at zero this year.
Right, it was
So
funded at like,
funded at zero for in the FY 27 budget.
right, and in 26, I think it was like 300 and something.
Yeah,
So that,
365,000.
yeah, so that was, so which tells me as you're building the budget up from these line items in the past, I know sometimes it's hard to tell that there might be other line items that are over budgeted in order to pick up the deficiency of the line items.
Yeah, and part of that's been done in the salary work, right? And like, so when you get into the super detail, like, into the 1,200 lines, there are lines, because Susan and I have gone through the 1,200 lines, and, there are salary lines by building that are up by 20%, but then lines that are down by 30%, because she's gone position by position by position where there were like round numbers holding. And it's a philosophical difference in, does the number come out in the end, or do you really want to have a tight accounting, or, the middle school should have this much. And again, we're going to have a fair amount of turnover, right? So we're budgeting for who we think is going to be in the positions now. And then, somebody's going to leave, and they're going to leave at a certain salary number, hire somebody else at a different salary number. Some of these things are going to move some anyways, between what we put in the budget book now and what ends up being, I can only imagine the same thing happens with the police and fire budget and all that stuff.
Oh, no.
But I think there'd been a compounding of that over years where a lot hadn't been adjusted. So we had like wild swings. I know we had this conversation with yourself and Carl. Was it just last year? I think it was just last year.
Yeah.
And so, you, at the end of the
It was
year.
actually just after Dr. Gilson came on board.
Okay, yeah, so you'd see these, some, especially when you look at the end of the year, you'd see I'm underspent by $300,000 and another line overspent, and mostly in salaries, but overspent by $250,000, right? And the net would be fine, but
Yeah. And that's kind of where I was getting at, because, the money came from somewhere. And just the last thing, is, with the utility line item, that's gone up significantly. And I know there's a projection in there, but you also have a projection of savings. So did you apply your projected savings to that line item, or is that going to just be revenue coming in from the savings for, how did you plan for that? So if you projected the increase in your utility line item, but you also have a project for savings, those smart.
Right.
So did you project the savings in the line item?
No,
Okay.
not yet, because
Okay.
we had started, and I had talked to Masbo before we just recently completed this audit.
Okay,
So
Yep.
it has citing comments.
Oh.
And so, the other recommendation that was shared with me at Masbo, one of the gentlemen said, well, what he decided to do was, because there was such a variability in the electrical and in the gas, he said he asked the town if they would take that back, and they did. And I'm not saying that we should do that here, but we're just trying to look at everything and try to be reasonable and not get caught short.
and just a suggestion, I don't know if you've ever looked into energy services contracts. It's procured under a different chapter of Mass General Law.
Mhm.
And really, it's a design build type of procurement. And you do have a company that comes in and does an energy audit on all buildings. And then it's structured in such a way where they'll project your savings over 20 years. And then with the savings that you get, and it's a guaranteed savings, it's something like this, but they might switch out some systems with split systems or whatever, but they do a really comprehensive audit. And then if, with the savings, that pays off maybe the borrowing that you might have to do in order to do it, depending on what the cost is. But it's another avenue if you're looking at, energy contracts, and it's something maybe you might want to hit.
Raphael, before you hop back on, I just wanted to ask a follow-up question on McKinney-Vento. There was at one point a partial reimbursement for those expenses.
Yeah.
Is that still in play?
Yeah, we have it. If you look at the revenue offsets, it's in, so when you get to the breakdown for between the budget and the assessment,
Yep.
it's one of the listed revenue offsets. So you've got,
What percentage is that offset?
there is no percentage. It's the way the state does it is they kind of throw it in at the end, is if they have some additional money, they throw it towards all the claims for McKinney-Vento. They don't have a system like they do for regional transportation, or they do for circuit breaker. Quite frankly, I think this problem is they're behind the 8 ball on this reality when it comes to the state. And so I'd have to pull it up because I had it in the slides last year for the budget, but it's completely variable. Like some years it's more, some years it's less.
So it's not a guarantee.
It's a guarantee we'll get something, or unless the state's budget goes completely bonkers. And it is
It is.
she being the governor does have some McKinney-Vento funding in her budget in her budget. But the way they do it is they take all the claims from the entire state and then they just distribute what available funding they have.
You budget the revenue?
The revenue is as an offset. So the way we have it is, so, the budget 80, wherever we're sitting now, 84 million and change, right? So then we take the chapter 70, we take, what do we have? Solar, we have a couple of other revenue offsets, and including McKinney-Vento, or we then get, that's step one. Then we start getting to assessments. So it's listed as one of the offsets before before assessing the town. So yes, it is listed as revenue, but it's not in the budget. It's outside the budget before we get to assessment.
Raphael, you had your hand up again. Yes, sir.
Yes, final 1 or 2 questions on the transportation and the McKinney-Vento thing. So in my job, when I have to move 130 to 200 things, 130 to 230 things from one point to another, there's a lot of planning, a lot of discussion. There's usually a program manager or project manager involved. How are you folks? How are we managing this right now? Are these folks calling the cab companies themselves? Are they calling the car services themselves and then giving you the receipts, or do they have a stipend? Do they have a card? What are the mechanics of actually paying for this on a daily basis? These to and froms on a daily basis.
Yeah, so it's a good question. So so right now the responsibility sits with 2 different administrative assistants in our office to do their best to try to find a vendor when the need comes in. We had put in our original priority budget requests to try to put in a position for transportation coordination to handle this, plus our regular day transportation, but it wasn't a position, given where we found ourselves with the overall budget, that was something that made it through. You'll see in our overall budget presentation, not the one that was given tonight, but the one that goes to the school committee. It's listed in our list of priority items to have a transportation coordinator to help with this, among other things, to be able to help explore more effective cost solutions. We've talked about, we'll be better off buying our own vehicle, but again, do we have the capacity internally to do that work? Not right now. We had proposed a position, but we just don't have the way to put that position in the budget right now. So right now it's split between two administrative assistants who do that work among their other duties.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that. I appreciate the responses, and for the trajectory that this is headed, I think it's worth a follow-up discussion. I'd like to see the hard actuals, as we track them throughout the year. And I do think based on the trajectory of what we're getting ready to spend to comply with this program, it's worth having the discussions of, a better way to do things, a more efficient, a more effective way to do things, whether it's under a contract, 2 contracts, 3 contracts versus, single call outs, single truck rolls, single cab rolls. Thank you.
Yeah, and I while we were sitting here, although my contact seems to have rolled upside down, so it's a little fuzzy, but I looked it up while we were sitting here. So budgeted, as we saw, 190. Year-to-date expenditures currently on that line are, again, my contact seems not to want to cooperate, but it looks like 230, almost $239,000, and we have $502,000 encumbered. So that means, we have bills we're anticipating to spend because we have contracts with, so together that's 700 and whatever that is together. Trying to do the math at $740,000 currently, either encumbered or currently already spent in that one line.
That's an excellent clarification. I appreciate that. And I lied. I had one more question. What do you from your pilot co-pilot seats? What do you attribute the doubling of the homeless student population in 3 years to?
Completely anecdotal, completely theoretical, right? So just one person's opinion on this. I think it's largely driven by the shifts in the housing market in the area and then still having a need for a workforce that can't afford to purchase their own homes. So we end up with many families that are occupying single family homes. So you have multiple families living in a single family home. And it's sort of a lot of it maps with our shifts in demographics as well. And I point to our friends over at the islands. They're about 10 years, maybe even 15 years ahead of us, but they saw a similar pattern. They're also landlocked. I don't know. They're island locked. They're surrounded by water, so it's a slightly different situation, but they saw this shift 15 years ago, and it's not a direct parallel, but we're definitely seeing some of that as well, where the need for work is still here, so it's being replaced by folks who maybe look at housing a little bit different, and or people are just being priced out of their own ability to have a home. They're all things that we all know, right? There is no year-round rental market on the Cape, or kids move, especially this time of the year. I would be interested to see if we took this data point in at different points in the year. Families can get winter rentals. Is it different in the shoulder season versus in the middle of the winter? I don't. But there are a lot of factors that definitely influence it. But it's largely that more and more people living in multiple. So because if you're doubled up, you don't have your own home, and that under McKinney-Vento that you are homeless.
Okay, so McKinney-Vento does define homeless.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions from other committee members on the topic of transportation?
I have a tangentially related question. I mean, we could spend time solving for McKinney-Vento, but I guess like my real question is, it seems like more of a systemic issue. Like, are there other creative ways you're thinking about addressing the homeless population? Do you have like social workers, or is there other ways that we're thinking about this?
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely we're fortunate to be staffed when it comes to social workers and support staff there. And I say say it all the time in school committee meetings. We have a great community that provides us with beyond, what we have in our budgets that are great as far as donations and supports that we're able, I signed off on a ridiculous amount of donations, especially around the holiday season, that came into all of our schools, whether it was through individuals or through organizations. So we have a lot to provide as much supports as we can. I can't make housing up here. You know, so we do what we can. And then as far as the transportation piece, we do what we're required to do. We create as many opportunities to provide support through that. And then from a finance standpoint, we are trying to look within the capacity that we currently have on looking at, some other options. I'm not sure, if we decided the trick becomes like, because we have talked about this, we'd be better off purchasing a vehicle and hiring a driver. The trick is hiring drivers is hard. Everybody's competing for drivers, and then it's I don't know, it was one of the slides that showed like where everybody's located,
Yeah.
right? So it's, if we buy our own van, it might take care of one or two kids because like one kid's in Hyannis, another kid's in Wareham, a third kid's in New Bedford, right? So we have to sort of really, and I haven't had the time to really sit down and analyze all that.
Well, and also to work collaboratively with our biggest partner in crime here, which would be Barnstable, because they have exactly the same issue.
Right. Yeah, so we have had some conversation with with the Cape Cod Collaborative. Would this be something that they'd be willing to take on and create a position that could work on this, or with the Cape? I brought that up with the executive director, and she's expressed some interest, but then again, they have to be able to build up the capacity to have that position. And then because even if we're going in the same direction, right? Even and if Barnstable has a student in New Bedford and we have a student in New Bedford, can the same transportation piece? I think there's some potential there. So we are trying to work it from a couple of angles.
Can we go back to some of the biggest pieces of the transportation? So our regular day transportation services roughly 1,600 students. Can you sort of broadly describe the terms, and the the length of the contract, what's in that contract that we should know about? Because that is the biggest single component of the total expense.
Yeah, it's got one more after next year. It's got one more year on it, right?
I think so.
Yeah. It's got a 5% increase built into it
Every year.
for the 5 years that it was a contract. And then the next year though, I'm pretty sure this next year is the last year of the contract. So not the current year, but the 26-27 school year is the last year of the 5-star contract, but I'm going to go back and double check. So then we'll have to go out. I think it was a 3-year contract with an opportunity to extend for 2 years. So we'll have to go out to bid, and that makes me a little nervous because every time schools go out to bid, there's usually a larger step increase in the cost. However, this year, I know one thing that we are one of those under that strategic objective number 2, couple of the things that we've been able to put in place are some better systems for parent communication and data collection from our families. So going into this next school year, we will be, we can't charge for transportation because of regional school reimbursement, but we can, what's the word I'm looking for? put in a process in where people have to like request a bus stop. Like right now, we design assuming every single kid is coming to school. We create bus stops assuming every single kid is coming to school. Has anybody driven by our schools during arrival or dismissal? Because there's a lot of people who drive their kids to school. So starting this spring, we will be having people request bus stops. It was part of what we wanted the transportation coordinator position to do too, would to be manage changes and all that stuff, but we'll figure out another way around that. But anyways, so we'll be designing then bus stops around only people who will be actually riding the bus, and which I'm anticipating is going to reduce the number of stops significantly. Which not only will be making our bus stops and our bus runs more efficiently, but then as we head into the next contract, because our contract is built on the number of buses, the number of runs and the number of buses.
I was gonna say, it's not based on the number of kids.
Yeah. And so I anticipate then we're going to be able to, whether it's with the current vendor, because we'll have to go out to a full open bid process. So whether it's with the current vendor or whether it's with a new vendor, I anticipate we're not going to need the intermediate middle schools where we get the most amount of ridership. That's probably going to need to be the same or something close there. But I anticipate there'll be some other places where we might be able to trim some buses, which would then mitigate the impact of the increase.
But right now, we are anticipating a 5% increase on that core.
Yeah.
Every year.
Yeah, which is really just one more year, next year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we have a wild card. Raphael has his hand up again.
Well, your comment, trim the buses, just triggered this here. So is our current contract holder bringing us ideas on how to value engineering their fleet, the routes, our carbon footprint, fuel usage, maintenance, etc. So if we have a route with 20 kids, are we still hammering it with a full size bus, for example?
I would
go ahead.
Yeah, I would say it's a point of consternation.
No, it's a fair answer. If you need to look into it more, I appreciate that, because here's the reality is a church van uses a whole lot less fuel going the same route than a full size yellow bus.
Yeah, and
partially full.
Yes, I guess the short answer would be I'm not sure. We have been working with the bus company to try to optimize routes for a while, including this year, with varied success, I guess is the way I would phrase it. And that's my politically.
I'm not surprised by that answer or their attitude and their approach towards us. Thank you for that honesty.
So, are there any other questions related to transportation? Otherwise, I think we maybe.
George has his hand up.
George, yes, George.
Just to follow up on that, how many bus companies can you deal with? What are there, 2 on the Cape? 1?
I think there are currently 2 or 3 that are operating.
Therein lies your problem, monopoly power, but never mind.
So we also provide transportation services for St. Pius. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think it might be 1 bus this year, 1 to 2 buses. Yeah,
but I think they've shared like routes so that we don't just have like a St. Pius bus. We have a bus that picks up all kids and drops them there and then stops at other.
But it's required.
Yeah.
So, but it's not separately accounted outside. In other words,
it is. Yeah, it's transportation for private schools.
Okay.
It's got its own. Yeah,
it's got its own. Yeah. So cost center.
It's 6,000. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. 6,900. Okay. I think that one was beat with that. Yes, maybe not, but we. So one of the things that. we referenced the availability of the end of year reports. Those end of year reports have invaluable information about that level of detail. So it'll be interesting. I'll be working probably with you on sort of mapping that back into the budget because it's really very powerful stuff.
Okay.
Because we have an Eversource guy here, was intrigued with your take on the 13% estimated increase in electricity costs. Or do you have to be quiet on that?
I had to pause to measure my words. So let me say this. The engineers and business folks that run the utilities, and I'm going to go out on a limb and speak for National Grid and Eversource, okay, have to adhere to the policies that are passed.
Correct.
Okay. So we are limited in what we can do within the constructs of, say, Mass Saves and all the other programs and structures that are out there that are not ours, that are not under the purview control of National Grid or Eversource.
All right, so the estimate of 13% is not unreasonable then.
Absolutely not.
On those slides, I assume that those are school slides, or they correspond to schools?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Do you are you a part of Power Options? Are you bidding out your electricity to lock in the rate? Have you looked into that?
The supply rate from the
Yeah,
supply side.
we were trying to find that. I know David spoke about it before, and so I've mentioned that to Susan, and we just haven't been able to track down that information.
It just
Yeah.
might be something to look into to
Yeah.
lock in the rate. Then you know what you're gonna budget, and then you know.
And I'm pretty sure we just can't find the documentation.
Okay, it's just something to take a look at. Because we didn't budget 13% for an increase. I mean, we know electricity is going up.
Yeah.
And it goes up, because of, it's really rising because of the energy efficient programs that they're doing because, the ratepayers are paying for it.
Yeah.
But I'd urge you to, contact Cape Light Compact or something like that
Yeah.
and then see what you can do to lock in those rates.
Yeah.
Makes it easier to
Yeah.
budget.
So we're gonna put that in as a follow-up. Got it, thank you.
Yeah.
I hate to say, it, but look whose hand is up. Raphael, you're my.
So so I'm going to follow up Jennifer's comments. I agree with everything she said. I will add one thing is when you are entertaining these PPAs or energy service contracts, please make sure an attorney on our behalf that represents us, the town, the school district, reviews the contract. And also I would recommend town engineer or someone with some knowledge of power systems, electricity, and the way things work, look at it as well in parallel with the attorney. Thank you.
Okay. Excellent. Just next item, we covered Paras, right? Was sort of the next topic. On that, I just sort of was doing a quick. So on the slide that showed, it was just above the electricity slide, it sort of had this fine print. And just out of curiosity, what was the total?
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. See, the paraprofessionals are part of a union that has multiple. It has the admin assistants and
So that includes them.
yes, it does.
Okay.
All right. And so if I were to go in, I think I could give you the total, but
But it's, again, we can just
Yeah.
follow up later.
yeah, that's
Just
would
follow
be
up
fine.
later.
Well, there is the two 2330 gives you paraprofessionals and instructional assistants under instructional services. That gives you a total line for proposed. You're talking about total salary?
No, it was just a number, you know, I was sort of.
Or number.
The bottom of the, I was like,
The sum of the 27 funds?
yeah.
Yeah.
And again, this can be a follow-up, this isn't gonna break the bank today.
Can I ask a follow-up
Yeah,
on the line 2330 though? So that 5,033,000, that's pre the $317,000 recommendation cut.
correct.
Yes.
So, out of curiosity, because I thought you did a great job when discussing this with the school committee. I'm just curious, like, what is causing that increase though, from like actual 25 to that original budget?
So a couple of things. So one is, as Dr. Gilson mentioned, the way it was budgeted previously was just assuming a number for the number. So number of para educators times an assumed number, as opposed to actually going in every para, what's their hourly rate times the number of days, et cetera, et cetera. So, and there was a mismatch between what the assumed number was and para educators. Two is we've done some work over the last couple of years to increase their rate. They were the lowest paid group on the Cape, so they've had some salary boosters. And then the third thing is, in addition to just raising that whole overall group, we have, paraeducators who work with kids in inclusion settings, right? And then we have our substantially separate programs where we have our kids with the highest levels of needs. Sometimes staff in that space might be bit, spit, kicked, etc. And there was no pay difference between the person who worked in a classroom with a kid who needed a little reading support versus the paraeducator who worked in the space that needed a higher level of training that might potentially get bit, spit, scratched, etc. So we renegotiated a difference in that hourly rate, which again puts upward pressure on the salary. So when you add those three things together,
So now it's like, call it 4.7 million, right?
yeah. Again, and you heard the conversation, right? So some school
Yeah.
committee members have some thoughts on that, but
Politically correct again. Do you have like any set? So some of that is required. Some of that payroll is required by law, right? For like,
yeah,
is that right? For special ed and
yeah.
certain IEPs and everything. Do you have an idea of what is like, how much of that 4.7 is like fixed cost versus variable? Or is that, I don't know if that's doable or not. I'm just curious.
Yeah, so I mean, we made the recommendation for the 10 because we believe that we wouldn't make any reductions into our programs. And then our special education department took a hard look at the paraeducators who work in general education settings. And if we think a little bit more purposefully about how we organize kids in general education settings next year, and group kids a little bit more purposefully, that across the entire district, kids that, because like without getting too far into the weeds on the IEP process, but like if an IEP says a kid needs a one-on-one, then that's 1-to-1. But not a lot of IEPs call for that, because that's a real high level of need. And like there's this another a law which speaks to what's called a free and appropriate public education, and which speaks to this idea of a least restrictive environment for kids, right? So ultimately, you're supposed to provide kids an education under free and appropriate public education that is as least restrictive as possible. And when you add adults to a kid, that's more restrictive, right? So a one-on-one is a fairly restrictive environment. So you're trying to provide as the least restrictive as possible for that kid to be successful, right? It's it in a nutshell, high level. And so in some cases, we have kids, quite frankly, in more restrictive environments than they need to be because they don't have a one-on-one in their IEP, but there pretty much is just a one adult in that space, extra adult in that space for one kid. Where instead we could have like 1 to 3 in a space if we just did class placement a little bit more purposefully next year. So when we look at that across the entire district, that's where we felt we had the space to do that. And it wasn't, it isn't in, and I get it. I understand where the passion comes from, but it's not, a kid who's medically fragile or a kid who's got a significant need that we're going to remove that student's parents from cater. Yeah.
Jennifer.
Do you have a cost to date? Because that tells me is this year you're going to be overexpending that line item. Because of the huge increase. So do you have a cost to date for that
For the
line
paraprofessionals?
item? Yeah, you could usually do a projection on what your actual cost will be for FY 26.
Yeah,
Tell you how much far behind you're gonna be. Because that's what it seems like. I mean, a lot of these
Yeah,
increases are
I-
because,
I think that they were projections and I have been monitoring the year to date. So I don't have that right now.
Okay.
But it is a concern.
right, yeah, I was just curious how, what that number was.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we froze this year's budget based upon this concern.
Yeah, so the other observation from that conversation last night, again, it was focused on, to me, a lot of it was the worst case, it was a situation where you had out of control meltdown.
Yes.
But by and large, we go back to, it's a spectrum, right? So we have, kids who need extra help, mainstream without an IEP, those who are mainstream but have an IEP, those who have split time. And and also as it relates to ELL, so there's all of these little conversations. And so at some point, I don't think it's because I'd drive everybody crazy if I did this, but I'd be very interested at some point is to seeing how that all works together. Because if you think about it, just because we have, according to the reports, we have about 500, I'll take that back, 514 students with IEPs.
Yeah, I can tell you exactly.
Yeah.
Give me a minute.
And we have 37 of those out of district. So it was, then you start doing I think there's a couple of things, also the pre-K specifically, 50% by definition, 50% are special needs.
Yeah.
A lot of that's speech pathology. And so when you start looking at that bigger picture, it's not just, and I think that's sort of the point, it's not just who's getting paid today, it's really sort of Dr. Smith's point about what's the right combination, and then that influences the number of people. So just a little bit more conversation on that. I specifically think that the number for Emmy Small is understated, because if we have 30 kids in there with special needs in the pre-K, it leaves nobody else. So either the number is really off or.
Yeah, as of today is 606 students
Right.
that are on IEPs.
So that may be an update. So very good.
And that includes, I don't know if that includes out of district. I have to pull a different report for that, but
Yeah.
that's from pre-K all the way through our 18 to 22 program.
When you said you froze the budget, did you put a hiring freeze on? Is that what you mean? A hiring freeze?
No, I mean, nobody can
Frozen.
spend any money
Like-
unless they get approval from us.
Yeah.
So let me ask you about that. So if the paraprofessionals, I look at that as the salary line item. How can you freeze the salary line item if someone's working, you have
You're
to
not
pay?
freezing.
Yeah, you still gotta pay.
But line item,
So you didn't-
salaries have been encumbered for
Right,
the
but-
year. And, we've frozen pretty much everything.
Any
else.
other expenditure?
Okay, so it's not just salaries in the paraprofessional line item that we're looking at, you have expenses to the
Yes.
departments as well, so
Yes.
it's not just a
No.
pure salary. line.
No, but we also may need to take from other lines in order to.
Right.
So we're
So,
trying to assess.
You know, any technology purchases, any purchases at the school
Mm-hmm.
level, supplies, any of that stuff is. all been-
Right, so you froze the expense line item in that paraprofessional line item.
We,
Salaries.
the entire budget has been frozen.
The expenses, not the salaries though.
Not the
Yeah, I
salary.
mean, yeah, we're gonna keep,
Right.
I just-
keep paying people,
I just, right, no,
but no other expenses.
I didn't know if it was usually when you know, if it's that type of line item, it would be, you know, we have a hiring freeze on, because you have to pay the salaries, and I just wanted
Right.
clarification,
Yeah.
just.
Yeah, we're not hiring, well, yeah, we're not gonna be hiring any additional staff, and nobody's spending, unless it's an emergency, something breaks that needs to be.
Right, no,
fixed.
that's
No
right,
expenses.
expense line,
Yeah.
operating expenses.
That's
Okay.
right.
I think along the same lines, though, is the question that was raised about the unhoused. I mean, I sort of see a general pattern that sort of says our students with IEPs, it's been fairly static. I don't see, are you anticipating basically, or the assumption for the budget is relatively static?
Yeah, we had an uptick this year, we think we understand what is behind that, and so without getting something I'd rather not talk about in a public meeting, so,
Very good.
but I don't anticipate that that's like a trend, no.
Okay. So that sort of brings us, we did, one of the things we'd also talked about was sort of the position. This is one of the benefits that we had from Cape Cod Tech is basically when they presented their budget was just a quick snapshot of the number of positions in different functions. Is that something that we can just sort of follow up with you on?
Yeah, so Susan and I talked about that, and we do think it's something that we'll be able to produce. It just, we're gonna need a little bit of time because, you know, I know I said this to you. Cape Tech doing their budget is like us only having to do it for the high school, so it's a little bit of a bigger ask. And we haven't, you know, done it before, so it's setting up the system to do it. So, and both of us are planning on actually taking some vacation next week, so, but we will, once we get back, we will put our, and quite frankly, it's gonna be Susan, so I shouldn't take any week credit for this. She'll get back to it, but I do want her to actually take vacation time next week, so.
So I think,
She already gave me a rough
Look at
idea on
it,
how she's
okay.
thinking about doing it, so,
Yeah.
yeah. I do think it's something we'll be able to get to, yeah.
so I mean,
I don't know how far we'll be, I think we'll sort of have to start maybe now going forward, I don't know. Like going back is gonna be very difficult, going to some of the systems issues that I've mentioned before, there just are some fundamental things that we're really working on trying to clean up, but it makes it harder to pull some of the historic data. We can do it, but it's not easy. So it would be much easier just to sort of establish that we're going to do something like that, go from now and just move it forward.
right.
Yeah.
Well, again, I think the big question that I've heard from a number of people, and I don't know if anybody else in the committee has heard this, but again, you implemented a 33 headcount cut where you literally said, as you did in the meeting, you had to say, you know, your services, you know, we are not renewing your contract, and that's always a really hard thing to do. So I think it's a useful point to help the public at least understand that those 33 positions disappeared and have not come back. So that's another piece of that I was concerned about or wanted to make sure we addressed. No, what was the other? So parent positions, I think that's, so once we have, we are basically in the weeds right now for the next 3 weeks. to, so certainly I would commit to supporting anything that you guys could help us understand better. Mr. Perkins.
Yeah.
Mute.
George, unmute.
They did. If we're done with the discussion, I have a more general question I'd like to pose.
I think so, sir. Yes.
I deeply respect the expertise of my colleagues as we go through each of these line items. And certainly I respect the insights of those who are on the front lines, Susan, Mark, and all their staff. But I'm just worried about, I understand we're driven by scarcity and choices must be made. You can't have everything. But nonetheless, when we started this process, I think, Mark, you said something to the effect that there were a series of goals that one of your planning committees come up with, but among those was excellence. And yet, I immediately see a table that focuses on what I'll call mediocrity. So we compare ourselves to mediocrity. And I wonder whether or not there's some advantage to also consider the best. And how do we stand relative to them? Now, I say that understanding that, this would cost something for Yarmouth, but nonetheless, this is half of our budget or more. Such an investment drives people to Yarmouth, thereby driving up property valuations. People who want to come here usually will tell you something to the effect of it has something to do with schools, among other things. So I'm just wondering, there is a return to thinking of the things this way, but I'm just wondering, why don't we take a look, or why can't we see how we compare to the best? And I don't know how you define those. I have my own opinion how you define those, but there must be a subset of the school districts that are considered the cream of the crop, instead of looking at ones that bounce around right around the state average.
I think there's at least the statistics show that there is a strong, not a correlation, but what's the right word? Family income has a lot to do with relative what do they call it, performance metrics or pupil performance metrics. That's not to say that that's the only answer, but certainly schools which have and also I'll send you a table which will talk about some of that stuff.
Yeah, and I appreciate your comments. I do worry, and that's sort of where that slide, the second to last slide, comes from in the slide deck, is over time, if you're constantly talking about reductions in a school district in a place in which school choice is a thing, right? School choice, it's a reality here on the Cape, but it doesn't exist everywhere, right? Talk to my colleagues who work around the 128 belt. They don't have this conversation. Yeah. Kids go to school in the district in which they live. But in an environment where school choice is a real thing, and we're trying to turn the tide on school choice in DY. But when you're constantly talking about, well, we're going to be cutting this, cutting that, cutting this, cutting that, and then it just makes it more attractive to say, well, they're not cutting things in Monomoy, they're not cutting things in Nauset, so we're going to keep flowing that way, which just compounds the problem, right? So then more school choice dollars, part of what we're facing in the budget right now is we saw an uptick in school choice out, right? So that affects what we get assessed, which is in our budget, which increases that cost. So they're just, I definitely do worry definitely do worry about that. And it, you know, impedes our ability to move certain things forward, which are in our strategic plan to help improve achievement, to help improve our facilities. You know, we move stuff out of our operating budget. And we're going to still move them forward with E&D, but now they're not part of our regular ability because it's not in our operating budget, right? So now the school committee doesn't have a regular mechanism to address building needs. Next year, they're either going to have to try to find a way to work it into the operating budget or find some other way to address year 2 capital needs, because they do now have a 5-year, or we're still in the process of trying to get it approved by the school committee. We've presented it to them. They've sent it back to subcommittee. So it's almost all the way approved. But we were trying to build, you know, a mechanism to have a way to address at least some of the capital needs every year. Now this moves it into E&D, and you can only spend out of your savings account for so long until you don't have a savings account. So it's a long-winded way of me saying I appreciate those comments.
Mhm. Jennifer, any other closing thoughts?
No.
So if there are, I mean, because oftentimes our best thinking occurs after the meeting. So if there are additional questions or concerns that as you reflect on tonight's session, please forward those to me. And I will, again, I'll ask you to sort of quickly recap sort of the action items that did come up.
Yep.
And we'll get those off to you guys. Hearing no other questions, I think we're done.
Super.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you
very
so much.
We're just going to do housekeeping now.
Yes. You housekeep away. I'm going to go have dinner. Thank you.
Yeah, you too.
It's to Jennifer.
I really don't have any updates at this time.
That's always good. So our next thing is discussion and possible vote for provisional recommendation for the FY 27 Public Works budgets that we reviewed last week, and that would include the enterprise budgets of water, wastewater, and septage.
Water, wastewater, and septage will be changing with debt numbers. We'll have those in 2 weeks.
Okay, so we will defer on those. So that would leave us with. So that would cover facilities, DPW administration, highway, snow and ice, waste, solid waste, and parks and cemetery would be that group. So we would exclude that. We would in past weeks we would consider approving it as a group. Oh, Nate, sir. Yep.
Yeah,
No, he doesn't. It's the.
Oh, okay, no. So we can either do these one by one, or particularly if there's a concern or a need for recusal. Otherwise, we could do it as a group. So do I hear a motion to, first of all, does anybody want to take one or more of these separately? Okay. Then I would consider a motion to approve the departments I just referenced as a group. Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Second.
Okay, so who was who made that motion? I'm sorry.
Nate.
Nate. And Mr. Perkins.
Second.
Okay, any additional discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote.
Aye.
Alyssa is an aye. George.
Aye.
Raphael.
Aye.
Nate.
Aye.
Bob.
I think he's gone.
I think he,
Yeah, okay. John,
Aye.
and I'm an aye as well, so it'll be a 6-0. The next item is a discussion possible vote to approve the prior meeting minutes. And this was a test. This was only a test. Somebody clicked on the wrong button. That would be me. So I sent you January 28th, which was the wastewater notes, which I thought Jackie did a great job capturing the notes. And I also sent you the minutes from the previous meeting, which had already been approved. We do not have the February 4th minutes yet. So are there any changes, amendments to the minutes of January 28th?
I'll move it.
Mr. Anderson, approve without amendment.
I can second that.
Alyssa. Any other updates? Okay, roll call vote.
Aye.
Mr. Perkins, Raphael,
All right.
Nate,
Aye.
aye,
Aye.
aye, 6-0. Okay, so we're up to that point where we're talking about the budget process. So we are the agenda should be posted tomorrow
Yep.
for the meeting of the 18th. So the 18th is police and fire. And so come ready, come armed.
Lousy pun.
Yeah, I know. And that will be followed on February 25th with our what should be our final budget review cycle. So that would include Cape Cod Tech will be sort of the presenting that week. And we will be at that time also taking a fresh look at any of the departments, including the debt service for the enterprise accounts. The final numbers should be available also for the administration department, because we would have the healthcare and
Healthcare is not going to change the budget.
Okay.
I put 8% in the budget,
What are you worse?
so I just wanna, I know that
She had
Don't let
inside,
everybody
she had
know.
inside information on that.
healthcare's not gonna change.
Yeah, and then so the only other one would be
Barnstable County retirement.
retirement, so that would be the only other thing. And so that would wrap up the budget review cycle. Now, that doesn't mean that we're done, because there are going to be some follow-ups. We are required to be part of the public hearing on the budget.
March 10th.
March 10th. Also on March 11th.
The meeting, remember? We talked about that.
No, they wanted to, well,
No, I'm not going to be here, so
You're
we're
not
gonna
gonna-
put everything to the next week.
next week, the 18th. So we also are going to be getting an update from the biggest probably capital expenditure that is being proposed, which would be the library. They should have their estimates at that point. So that will be another follow-up as well. I also had sent everybody who loves to read the draft of the Finance Committee report that gets published in the annual town report, annual town meeting documents. Again, if anybody wants to edit or make suggestions, I'm starting to run out of time, so please get back to me on that.
When is that due?
It's already past it.
Never mind, strike that.
The good news is the people who have to hold my feet to the fire aren't holding my feet to the fire yet. Are there any other personal items that people want to bring up at this time? Boy, that's good. If there's no other questions, do I have a motion? I would consider a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Mr. Anderson. Second,
Okay.
Mr. Perkins. Roll call vote. Alyssa,
Aye.
George.
Aye.
Raphael,
All right.
Aye.
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. At 8, 7, what do you say?
All right, I'm gonna turn this off, everyone. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Have a good night.
Have a good night.
I think this was the most ever detail that we have ever gotten from the school committee ever.
Good stuff. I agree.
Thank you.
Fire the